Allow me to greet you with words from Jude, where it says, "To those who are called, who are beloved in God the Father and kept safe for Jesus Christ, may mercy, peace, and love be yours in abundance." Greetings. Well, the passage that I have for your encouragement today is Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 17. Allow me to read it to you, and I encourage you to take time yourself to read it. This is a key section of Mark that I'll maybe explain a little more thoroughly in a few moments. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him any more, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of the voice, "What have you come to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And then Jesus said to him, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. And now there on the hillside a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirit begged him, "Send us into the swine, and let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea, and were drowned in the sea. And the swineherds ran off and told it in the city and the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw that the demoniac sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it. And then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. May the Lord bless the reading of His Word. This section, or this chapter, chapter 5, starts and clues you in by this travel across the sea there, that this is Jesus living in and reenacting, among other things, the Jonah story. If you remember, Jonah was commanded to deliver a message of God's grace to this evil superpower of the day, Nineveh, this kind of place of bondage and oppression. Jonah didn't believe that they deserved it, and resisted it, and gets kind of caught in this violent storm. The only way to be delivered is for Jonah is that he kind of resists, and then finally relents and says, "Just throw me overboard." He has this baptismal experience, in the depths of the sea, in this fish, and then finally, delivers the message to Nineveh, but very begrudgingly so. The end of Jonah ends with a question of will he be able to accept the grace that Nineveh has already accepted. But the difference in Jesus' story is that whereas Jonah was begrudging and running away from God's grace, Jesus is taking on that vocation of delivering mercy and freeing and delivering from bondage. He fulfills that commission from God in every time. In the verses right before chapter 5, another key part is where the disciples are amazed at Jesus being able to quiet the storm. He speaks order over the chaos. He goes faithfully to deliver words of grace where we resist it, where we resist God's grace going to others. And when his disciples see Jesus calm the storm, they say, "Who is this? Who is this?" They spent a lot of time with him already, but his power and his mission and his vocation and his faithfulness shocked them. Well, that's a key question there. Who is this? The disciples are asking this question because they're trying to get their mind around who Jesus is, and that's a calling for a Christian to spend their life contemplating and living into who Jesus is in the various parts of our life and work. Well, that question of who Jesus is will frame the next chapters in Mark. It'll be basically Jesus is answering it in the actions that he take. Time and time again, he's showing them as clearly as possible who he is. It's interesting. The disciples are asking who he is, but the demons know. In fact, this quote from the demons of Jesus, the Son of the Most High God, it's the clearest pronouncement of who Jesus is, his identity, so far in the book of Mark. Even when we don't understand Jesus, or there's parts of him that we resist, or we run away from, or we frustrate, or we battle against, there are evil forces, evil spirits, and so forth that know exactly who he is. They have no unclarity. Well, let me back up just a moment and just talk about this poor individual, besieged, beleaguered individual, the demoniac that Jesus comes and meets right when he gets off the shore. The fact that he's known as Legion will clue us into the first readers. The first people that shared these stories would have thought of Roman occupation. They would have thought of all that is wrong in the world. All those things in this world that seem so powerful, so big, so detrimental, but also seemingly unmovable, irreparable, things that are too big to be fixed. And it's like all the brokenness and oppression and bondage of the world is kind of, there's a microcosm in this man, in his own life. Sometimes we look out at the world and we say all the things that are wrong out there, but the struggles that we have in our own life are a microcosm of it. It's not just out there is the issue. We have our own struggles with our own heart, with our own ability to welcome God's grace into our lives and to radically transform how we treat others. So this man's being known as Legion is kind of a signal, especially for the first people that shared this story, the first people that read, that this is an example of what's wrong in the world. It's all come to part right in his life. And this bondage that he's in, again, his name is Legion. You can think about the Roman occupation of that part of the world. That bondage that he's in, it's harming him. He's harming himself with stones. He's dwelling among the graves. He's cut off from community. He's broken. Sometimes these powers of the world, these things that seem irreparable, too big to really even be addressed, would think, or even maybe lie and think that they're good. This is the way the world should be, or this is the way that it's always been. But it actually causes a lot of oppression and bondage. Again, I'm using this demoniac, this man, as an example of the bondage he was in, but also of the world writ large, the larger world. It's interesting, again, the demons, the evil spirits that have this man in bondage, are quite aware of who Jesus is and beg him for mercy. They come bow down before him and give him one of the strong in Mark and offer in Mark one of the most clear and most accurate pronouncements of who Jesus is. They know exactly who Jesus is, and they beg him for mercy. Now, I think another interesting thing is that Jesus doesn't want to torture them. They beg him not to torture him, just to let them, enter the swine, and he allows such. If Jesus isn't here even to torture these spirits, he's definitely here for our benefit. He's never here to torture us. He's here to deliver from bondage, not to harm us. We can take great confidence in that. Now, an interesting thing about Jesus is he's encountering this man who's, has very little clothes on because he's so wildly oppressed by this situation. He's dwelling among the graves. He's beaten and bruised. Some of those descriptions sound a lot like what would happen to Jesus himself on the cross. And so this is in some way a foreshadowing of the vocation, of the calling Jesus is taking on upon himself to draw all sin, to draw all oppression, to draw all bondage upon himself on the cross. And so by seeing this man, Jesus is also seeing what awaits him, at Calvary. He's seeing what awaits him at the cross, of that moment where all of our sins and all the oppression of the world and all that is wrong is kind of poured on him. He takes it, he bears it as a burden. In great faith, Jesus is willing to do this. In his faith and faithfulness, belief in God's ability to overcome even this, takes all that upon himself and then overcomes it. Trusts in God deeply, goes down to the grave, and then overcomes it in the resurrection and gives us hope that God will have the last word, not death and oppression, that God will have the last word. Well, another group that is very interesting to me here are the townspeople who kind of see this demoniac, and rather than responding super excitedly, are quite scared. And this is one of the parts of the Bible, again, that are I find to be so encouraging in its understanding of human nature. It's so trustworthy. It helps me, my faith, to really say, boy, this scripture is telling me about myself in a way, in the human condition, in a way that no other philosophy or worldview or so forth does. It's telling us that, look, when the townspeople came and saw this type of power, you would like to think that they rejoiced, but in fact, it scared them. Maybe they were afraid, what else will he do? Is he for us or against us? That's a question we're often asking ourselves. They even go on and beg him to leave. Jesus does, again, just like with the demons, the evil spirits, begged him for something. He relented. The townspeople beg him to leave. Jesus goes back, across the sea. But the man stays there and essentially becomes the first apostle to all the Gentiles. He isn't leaving. Jesus, in fact, commands him to stay and to begin preaching, and he does. He's got a story to tell. A story he understood when he was in bondage, and he understands what it means to be out of bondage, and he's going to tell his story about who Jesus is. Well, there's a lot going on in Matthew chapter 5, but I'd hope that maybe you could take a moment. The overarching message, I think, of this chapter is that Jesus comes with power, comes to answer that question that we ask of who is he? And not the power to harm, but the power to deliver, the power to bring freedom, the power to even enter the hardest parts of this world, our own lives even, and provide hope. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. To him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, to him be the glory and the power forever and ever. I hope that you are encouraged by your reading of Mark chapter 5. God bless you.